I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Luke Cohen. First, a couple of announcements. Be sure to watch the Forbidden documentary, Doors of Perception, available now to rent or purchase right from our website. It'll also soon be available on streaming platforms as well. We are booking guests for May and June. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome Luke Cohen. He is a rising voice of hope, inspiration, and leadership on our planet as a professional bard, mentor, community builder, and ecopreneur. He has been empowering individuals and groups for the last 15 years as a mentor for leaders, founders, and change agents with a holistic and consciousness-informed approach to healing and self-mastery. Luke, welcome. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on. What's up, everybody?
Thanks so much for coming on, man. I always say that it is time for folks like us to start taking over all industries, to start building our own systems, because the old systems are obviously crumbling, and with the rising awareness on the planet, folks are wanting real, genuine content, information, and people that they can connect with. And folks like yourself are exactly examples of that. So thank you so much for what you're doing. I'd love to not only hear more about that, but get your insights into the nature of this human experience, where we're at collectively, and what could be unfolding during these very important times. That's a lot to get to, but before we do, this is your first time on. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what got you started on this journey.
Yeah, thank you. And I love those subjects. I think they're some of the most important things we can talk about for sure. And definitely have a passion and say that my life is in service to those emerging systems, if you will. My purpose is to help shift culture on this planet. And there's a lot of different ways that I do that from my personal practice. So I basically got onto a spiritual path through my own personal healing. So I had a healing crisis when I was 22 years old. I went from being a very agile martial artist, athlete, competitive basketball player, to walking with a cane overnight in my last year of college. And so that sort of devastation of going from, a very competitive athlete to basically having to walk with a cane at 22 was really, really challenging, as you can imagine. And in that time, I had a spiritual awakening through tea and access what I call the living stillness of the universe for the first time. And I came back from that experience, and it trumped every peak experience I ever had in my whole life, every flow state in basketball, every peak experience through martial arts, every psychedelic experience. And we taste these flow states, we tap in, no matter who you are, we taste that sense of timelessness. We can have little glimpses of it, but this was like more than a glimpse. I was encompassed by it. And I came back with that, from that experience, pretty changed, and saw where my soul had been in the background of my life the whole time, and kind of merged with me. And I came back with this fire for truth. I'm like, okay, I really want to know how the universe works, and this is time to really seek. So I got kicked into my seeker mode, and I basically graduated college and went to India and never looked back, and that was 20 years ago.
Were you always aware of the corrupt nature of our systems, what we are subjected to through our mainstream reality, education, economics, politics, basically everything that we're subjected through from the ruling class down has a level of toxic corruption to it. And you find once you start to identify that, once you start to check out of that, your life actually becomes much better. When did you start to realize some of the things that weren't right about our reality?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's like two different lenses for that in my own lived experience, and then from like a collective level as well. Like, so for me, I was hyper aware even as a kid that something wasn't right, and I had sort of a old soul, you could say, awareness of impermanence. So I'd be, I grew up in New York City, so I would be, in the city, and I'd look at these. So I'm like in my little mind being like, this isn't gonna last.
Yeah.
This is impermanent. Like this like felt sense knowing. I remember waking up from a nap by the FDR Drive and like where the two bridges are and being like, what civilization did I incarnate into? Like super disoriented, like 8 years old. So I started to have these little flashes of like, what the heck am I doing here? And then for me, something really hit me hard at 14. I went to this weird alternative learning high school. Didn't get diagnosed as a neurodivergent until like my last year of the beginning of high school. And so my parents found this like cool alternative learning school in Manhattan. I would commute from Staten Island to Manhattan, and I would cut school a lot, just go skate and smoke weed and be a little New Yorker, And one day I wandered into this record store, and there was this, CD with the pyramid and the eye on it, with Novus Dociclorum, like the whole thing, and I was just like, what is this? And I listened. And so all these shadowy hip hop beats with all these samples of like around trilateralism and like really high level thought leaders and journalists kind of basically speaking to the NWO. And I was like, whoa. And my soul responded, like, I'm like, there's truth in this. Like I could feel it. And I knew I had enough intuitive sort of awareness, even with not knowing what it was called or what it was, to be like, okay, there's something to this. And I play for my friends who are like, what is this? Turn this off. Let's put an Eminem on or something. And I'd be like, no, you got to listen to this. There's something in here. And then fast forward to my freshman year of college, 9/11 happens, and I lose my brother-in-law, who was a firefighter. So that's kind of where my initiation started. And I could just feel like there was something in my gut was like, something's not right with this. Like intuitively, like when I watched the second time, I'm like, and I kind of knew that he was there, just like on a spiritual level. And I was like, whoa, what is happening? And then obviously got catapulted into my own, journey with my family and everything that we went through with that. But that cracked the door open through that loss and that sort of seed planting at 14. I would say I got red pilled at 14.
Wow. Yeah, right on.
Yep. And then the initiation from the red pill started with 9/11. And so I actually ended up taking journalism on as a second major because I wanted to get down to the truth. And this is back, in a point where they actually still taught critical thinking, before it was just like indoctrination at a very high level. It's still indoctrination, but there was still like, I would say the professors that I was working with then would be considered terrorist sympathizers now in like our post 9/11 world. But then they were like putting me on to game. Like I was reading books about how DEA whistleblower, like, like we're smuggling like heroin back through GI body bags in Vietnam and crack brought into the ghettos by the CIA. Like that was the stuff I was like learning about in college. I don't think they teach that kind of stuff anymore. But for me, I was probably one of the last waves of millennials that went through an institution and still had cool teachers that were like, this is how the world works. And it's completely imbalanced, learning about the Jamaican H2 workers, learning about, all this crazy, basically the massive erosion of investigative journalism. So I got obsessed because I was like, I want to know what happened. I want to know the truth. I'm a 5-1 in human design. The 1, we're investigators. We want to understand what's really going on, how things work. And so ever since then, it was just kind of like rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole to discover like what, how this world works.
Right on. Well, let's dive straight to the deep end and work our way back from there. I think that the entire planet needs a level of hope to cling on to right now. The chaos that we are experiencing is something that I never thought in my lifetime that I would see. Although, like you, from a very young age, I had the knowing that something wasn't right. I also had this strange knowing that during my lifetime, we may experience something very big. And I think we're really on the cusp of that. I think we're at a crossroads as humanity, and it's going to be up to us to decide where we're going to take this. And part of that is going to be to stop relying on our corrupt system and ruling class. But when I say that we need hope right now, I see that there is rising thoughts about the nature of our reality as it relates to our spiritual nature, what we're doing here, and the corruption that we're subjected to. There are many that are re-exploring these Gnostic understandings that we may be in some sort of trapped reality, that it may have been hijacked at some point, and we are basically energy slaves for some other intelligence, for some alien force, spiritual force, whatever they believe it is. And to me, I have more hope than that. I like to think that this is a learning experience, even the worst of it, whether it's been hijacked by evil entities or not. This place, I believe, is still for us, and even the worst of situations will make us stronger and will help to evolve us spiritually. But I'd love to get your insights into the nature of this experience, why we're here, has it been hijacked, is there hope?
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. My motivation in human design is hope. So I'm literally designed to give hope to the people. It's in my framework as a bard and the way that I storytell. And the first thing I'll say is that if the narrative is disempowering, it's not accurate. If the narrative that you're consuming drops your vibration into fear, it's not it. It's just not it. And the creation doesn't make mistakes, right? So I think what we have are stacks of inceptions. We have stacks of psychological, spiritual, etheric operations going on, and that the main, if I could boil it down to like just a very simple statement or a very simple understanding that will help the sensitive, attuned souls that are feeling less than optimistic about it, is to understand that we are multidimensional beings in this human experience, and that it's our multidimensional empowerment that the powers that were, and I'm going to refer to them as were, not are, because the paradigm is shifting. The powers that were have never wanted humanity to remember its true origins in divinity. So there's been a mass cover up of the true histories, of the true mythologies, of the true indigeneity of all of us, where we come from, our ancestral practices, the trauma that has been handed down generationally. So there's three things we can look at to start to get in power. We can take self-responsibility for our trauma of our lineage. And that is a commitment that each individual can make. No one else can make that decision for you. You commit to your healing, doors will open, you will attract the things you need to be supported. And then as you start to heal, the way that you perceive life will start to change. And it's easy to be reinforced with the negative narratives, because that's, again, it's like a layer inside of the false matrix that has these kind of hooks for sensitive people, for light workers, whatever you want to call us. There's these traps inside of consciousness that will try to hook in, lower your vibration, because you're that powerful. If you know how powerful you are, game over. Enough of us vibrating at a very high level, co-creating from the seat of our empowerment, from the seat of our multidimensional nature, and the remembrance of who we truly are, where we come from, what star system, any of that, however you want to orient to just a very simple human being that is out of their mind and in their heart. That is enough to tip the scales to shift the collective dream, because it is a dream. And there's many indigenous cultures and ancient cultures that understand that we're in a type of divine simulation, is co-creative. It's a dream, that those right now that are a shadow representation, the small, like the beings that you're referring to as the elite, they're not elite. If they were elite, they would be helping everybody. So they're actually lower down in the spectrum of awareness of consciousness. We would call them either Luciferic or Harmonic through Steiner's lens. They're like a collective egregor. But that Luciferic principle, there's a really great story that paints it. If we want to really go deep, that Lucifer, out of his great love for the Creator, descended 12 dimensions in density down to create a duality plane called Earth. So his choice, or its choice, that choice of that being to descend vibrationally 12 dimensions to this dimension to create a place of duality and free will, so that beings could choose to take the direction back towards Creator or go into the self-service. And that's really the split of free will and destiny and choice. If you would, it comes down to one choice. Are you aligning with the will of the divine, or are you aligning with your own personal gain, personal agenda? And the beings that are in power are exemplifying to us what the embodiment of self-interest looks like, to give us enough contrast to wake us up out of the dream and become back into our co-creative power and start to move towards the divine again. So everything they do to try to control and all their agendas they push are meant to catalyze the rise of our personal power into the remembrance of who we are. So it's actually, they don't really realize that they're still working for love and they're working for God, even though they're in a distortion around it. They're playing out that Luciferic principle, and that contrast is designed to wake souls up.
You mentioned egregores. I think that these thought forms, these things that we interact with, are like programs here to get us to grow and learn from, and also to help us understand that, yes, that darkness does exist, and it's horrible, but we can't align with that and get lost in it. We have to learn from it and evolve ourselves.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, we could be victimized by it, or we can allow it to be fuel for alchemy in our own transformation. You know, we can't liberate anybody else until we free ourselves. And that's a very challenging concept, depending at what level of duality you're playing in. And I know that when I was doing activism work, I was functioning in a very different state of consciousness, and we did beautiful things, and we got to do meaningful things in this world and help protect our water. And I still think that that's important work. And I think some people, based on where they are on the journey, are going to need to do that. They're going to need to put their 10,000 hours in of like holding a type of frontline boundary with old entities or old energies and have a more physical experience of learning. And other people are, removing themselves. They're getting their homesteads going, and they're growing food, and they're just like, I just don't want to participate, and I'm going to tend to my little 1.2 acres and grow my own food and make babies and do the thing. Like everyone's going to get their sort. If you're following your true design, and I reference human design, it's how, like we're each unique. We've all come into a world where there's a lot of programming, there's a lot of conditioning, there's a lot of trauma. And if we make decisions from that reactive based consciousness, when we're making impulsive decisions or decisions based on that kind of programming, then it could steer us away from what we're really here to do. So more of us get in alignment with our true design, and we follow that deep instinctual or intuitive, or as one of my mentors says, the small whisper of the soul. If we can hear that, we're going to be guided to where we need to be within our station in creation. And that's what I call it, our station in creation. Some people's, they're holding down a node, and they're being guided. Like I have one of my best friends, he's going back to Africa. That's his thing. He wants to go back to Africa. He's like, I'm going back to Africa, bro. I'm like, great. Yeah. He's like, I got to empower my people from there. I'm like, great. We're going to get our assignments, and we're going to be guided to go to where we need to be and who we need to build with and learn the lessons and have that dynamic friction of working out our family constellation, family trauma with the people we're building projects with, and realize, okay, I got to take self-responsibility. I've been playing out this pattern my whole life, or whatever it is, and it grows the soul. But there is something self-organizing in nature that wants us to actually thrive and wants us to be in a safe place where we can be an active co-creator with this reality, not a passive, not an observer. If we move into, I can't do anything and I'm powerless, or we move into blame and like we need to destroy, either one of those extremes is another hook, another inception program within the simulation, where if you tip into either extreme, that's where you get ensnared. We have to vibrate higher and higher and higher until we find exactly how life wants to guide us through this very delicate time, and where we need to. Don't go too far left. Don't go too far right. Stay in the middle. As one of my elders say, that if you walk on either side of the feather, you'll fall through. But if you walk on the stem, you're going to get through. It's like that middle path, that middle way. Buddha talks about these teachings. So what's the middle path right now? That's where I think that we'll find a lot of inspiration and clarity, and where our hope gets to be renewed. Our faith begets faith. We get to see, I jumped and the net caught me. I stepped and the stone appeared. If I keep doing that, it's just going to appear. You don't have to have it figured out ahead of time and try to have it all known first. We're going to have to make significant steps into the unknown, individually, tribally, and collectively. It's just the reality of where we're at in the game.
Right on. Well, let's talk a little bit about how we can navigate some of these false matrix programs that we're subjected to. those that participate are becoming immersed into a deeper simulation within a simulation. I'm with you. I think that it's all an attempt by Source to get us to wake up and realize our true potential, even the worst of it. So the worst of it's getting ramped up for those that are becoming aware to step up their game and to continue to bring bigger and better to that side of things, to the light. And I see that it's like another level in the video game that we're in, basically. So it's critical for those that even have a tiny spark of questioning reality, continue that with that. Nurture that curiosity and desire to find out more about who we are, what we're doing here, and why everything doesn't seem right in our reality.
So you have one side of the bridge, which is sort of game B, which we'll call New Earth. There's game A, which is, the current systems, the corporations, the current monetary system, and then there's the bridge between game A and game B. And there's the relational, the mythology, the economic, different aspects that will differentiate both systems. And some people are placed on one side to gather all the resources and help empower the people that are building the bridge, or empower the people on the other side of the bridge. Some people are already on the other side of the bridge, just living that way. They're in gift economies. They're living off the land. They're doing their tokenomics on blockchain, whatever. They're doing cool, progressive, systems change oriented, living in a new way. And then there's people on the bridge. I happen to embody all three archetypes. I'm working inside the system, on the other side of the system, and in between, trying to get a thing across. And so what I think is important to understand is that from an indigenous worldview, from the prophecies as they've been told by different tribes, we are in the purification stage. The sort of new earth is the renewal stage. So there is going to be a system breakdown that happens, and that's part of the purification period. We can't continue to have culture and current systems that don't have a relationship with the land. They've lost that true indigeneity of like being in reciprocity and how the payments work and how this whole dimension works in relationship with nature and each other and culture and community. And so there's always a closed system. Tyson Yunkaporta talks a lot about this. Great author, highly recommend his work. Sand Talk, Good Story, Bad Story, amazing. Should have him on your show. But he talks about how closed systems, it's all about control, and then eventually, it works until it completely collapses. Like Rome is a closed system. Just dominate, control, disempower, control, and then something clicks. Like reality sets in at a level that it can't be predicted or controlled, and then everything just falls apart. And so there's different projected outcomes of where we're going in terms of a potential civilizational collapse, or the Western world collapsing, or, our fears around, you name it, however it's going to play out, whatever totalitarian dystopian potential with AI, or utopian, like AI for making things easier for humans so we can focus on, we can meditate instead of working a 9 to 5 and create art, so we're kind of, we're being squeezed between two different potential realities of a regenaissance where we're realigning with the earth. We're bringing back the mythology of all our lineages and this indigeneity that, bridges our creation stories of like, oh, cool. Like you have the same archetype and even though we're, okay, that's amazing. Let's share a story, and then the dystopian one that a lot of people are afraid of, that if you're in fear around, you actually feed. And there's ways that timeline feeds off of people to help hijack their imagination and their co-creative power to actually create it, because those beings that want control can't, it's a lot of sorcery. It's not, we're at the point in the timeline where it's like, again, if enough people are in awareness of those narratives, they need to empower themselves to dream in that world they want. So there's kind of this beautiful opening in the timelines right now, which we call the golden timeline. We're getting back to organic time, because we're living, the part of how the false matrix works is it's built off of artificial time, the Gregorian calendar, these impositions that are squeezing consciousness into a more and more predictable, controllable little bubble, and where you need to pop out of that bubble, like pop out of the political sphere. That's a crazy bubble. Don't get caught in the left, right, don't go into reactivity. Don't go into hate. Any of those things will hook you right into the system, right? And so we have to step out of all that hate, all that reactivity, all that duality, all that polarity, and really see where my ancestors work. Where's my relationship with my ancestors? Where's my relationship with the Mother Earth? Where's my relationship with my own body? How am I taking care of myself? How am I taking care of my relations? Who are my relations? Where's my water? Where's my food? You know, these kinds of things, like that real village mindset that comes from indigeneity that we all have at our roots, no matter who you are, where you're from. We had a system for healing trauma, of somatically moving through trance to get shit out. You know, like that's the stuff we need to get back to is communitas, catharsis, all these tools that allow us to kind of shake out that artificial matrix. And a lot of it has to do with like the first hook, the first inception was time.
Right.
Was the kind of time calendar continuum that was placed on us from the colonial world.
The parasitic ruling class tries to get us to create the reality that they're shooting for. They do that through fear campaigns and different kind of programming. Where we're at right now is we have these movements that start out with great intentions and they seem to be beneficial for humanity, and then they get infiltrated and hijacked. And this whole community, the truther, conspiracy, it's been devastated by infiltration, and it gets people in these rabbit holes. It gets them stuck into something that is meaningless. It has no benefit for humanity, but they're paying so much attention to that, they're in that program, and they're not focusing on themselves and the real growth that has to occur. So it's all slowly being infiltrated, and we have to realize that we have to check out of all of it to a certain degree in order to not be trapped by it.
Yeah, I say similar to the way that I look at healing work with some clients, it's not about getting rid of, but creating a new relationship to, right? Like if I have this part of myself that I've tucked away, that I've dismissed as unlovable, and I've suppressed it and I push it, or I have charged towards it, like, I hate this part of myself, or I don't like this part of myself, I don't want to feel this part of myself. But until I actually come into relationship with that part of myself, and I sit with it and I learn about it, and I start to develop compassion towards it, empathy, and then I can have a very different relationship with it. Then it doesn't have so much energy over me, because all the pressing and pushing, it actually takes more energy to keep a trauma in place in the body than it does to release it. The amount of bioelectric energy to release a trauma is less than the one to hold it in place. And so these beings, these systems are a reflective shadow collective wound. And so we can change our relationship to those beings. We can change our relationship to those systems and create a healthier relationship to it that says, okay, this is my boundary, right? If we lost boundaries as a kid and we were violated, then we don't even have a concept of boundary. And so we have to go into punishment and reactivity and try to lash out and be like, the system, and, you know, and then that brings us into an unhealthy relationship with it, where now you're ensnared. Now you're hooked. Now they can use all their tanks and their guns because you've entered into a battle that you can't win. So where do you have to be a spiritual warrior? You have to come into a more dynamic relationship with it. And your greatest tool is compassion, divine love, discernment, intuition. These are the things that we need to navigate this time. The moment we drop into reactivity, that's where we lose.
100%. I'd love to hear about some of your profound spiritual experiences, including your NDE. It wasn't until I started exploring my own spiritual path, meditation, psychedelics was the big one for me that really caused that shake-up that I needed, and the connection. And I find when people have these profound experiences, whether it be near-death experience, psychedelics, other quote-unquote contact or paranormal type of events, that it will change their lives so much to a degree where they feel like they now have a connection to something, and that perpetuates itself. It becomes synchronicity in your life. I'd love to hear about your experiences, especially the near-death experience, and how that led to your connection.
Yeah, like, you know, for me, again, the big jump off point was the physical breakdown, nervous system burnout / injury into a peak experience. And then, you know, I'd say that I was deep in the plant medicine space for a while. I was studying and working with indigenous people in their traditional ceremony ways with certain plants. And that's a big rabbit hole to go down. It's getting more popular and I would say more half-baked. There's a lot of people that shouldn't be be discerning to where you sit and who you work with. But there are true lineages that are intact that are carrying those technologies for thousands of years of working with these specific plants that are meant to. I think the benefit of that work is to decolonize our consciousness. Like when you can have a relationship with the sacred fire again and understand your relationship to grandfather and know that that's a sacred relationship. These things are things that we need to reclaim, and we all have again that we go back through our lineages, we have that ancestral connection. But for me, I've had a series of initiations and a series of peak experiences that for me have just like been stripping and stripping and stripping and forcing me to reconcile with my own mysticism and my own humanity, which we have both. We have our soul journey, and then we have how we integrate that soul journey and still be able to function in relationship and business or in the world, which is challenging for creative, multidimensional, sensitive people. And so for me, I just feel really grateful that I've had a lot of epic teachers and guidance. And for me, that my recent near-death experience was sort of a catalyzing point in my journey in the way that I teach, in the way that I share, in the way that I relate with these wisdoms, because I think I was too self-identified as a spiritual teacher at one point. I think I was too in the identity of shaman at one point when I was doing plant medicine, all that stuff. We can create these spiritual identities that are actually can be traps as well. And so with that near-death experience, I basically died on dengue for 2 minutes when I was in Bali in the onset of the pandemic. Just I thought I had the thing, and then no, it was dengue. And my ex-partner at the time was kind of pounding on my chest, and I had left my body. I went to the toilet, left my body, didn't know I was gone. Next thing I knew, I'm traveling back down on the golden DMT light bridge. And I'm like, what? Okay, I'm back in my body, and she's crying, and she's like, oh my God, you're gone. And I'm like, it's okay. And I had no fear in my body. All this like golden Christ energy is like pouring into me, into my crown, filling my nervous system with this golden sort of like Christ-like energy. I had no fear in my body, and I was like, call an ambulance. And I spent a week in the hospital on this sort of shamanic fever journey with dengue, and I could see like Shmovid kind of sweeping out across the planet and the thought for it. And I was like, whoa. And then I was having these sort of fever past life memories of like waking up in a slum in Calcutta and then in ancient Scotland off the battlefield from a mortal wound. And I was just kind of going through this shamanic fever journey for a week. And then I came back and I was like really disillusioned because I was like, well, I was just gone. Like I had no memory. I didn't go to like white light place. I was just gone. And then I'm back and my whole reality had shifted. Like I was disoriented. And so I finally got my strength back and I went on a motorbike ride and I was listening to some music and I was thinking about like, okay, I kept asking, what's the point? Because whenever we go through disillusionment, we usually like the ego goes, well, what's the point? I had all these things that I wanted, or I had all these goals, or I had all this meaning that I was making, whether it be positive or negative. And when that gets stripped away, you're like, whoa, I got nothing to hold on to, nothing to grasp to give me meaning. So I'm like, what's the point? What's the point? That was my inquiry. And then I thought of a really dear brother who's like a fellow high priest, and we've seen each other through some pretty big initiations, like breakups and other things. And thinking of him, my heart opened. I just felt all this love for my brother. I was like, oh my God, like tears in my eyes. And then the answer dropped in like lightning. We're here for each other. That's why we're here. To hold this grid, to hold this field as a collective. And I started to think about all these other souls around the world that I love. And I just bawling my eyes out in gratitude for being alive. And it's like aliveness came back. And, shortly after, basically my guides were like, your hiatus, because I had basically gone into an experiment of non-transactionality for 2 years. I didn't do anything for money I wouldn't do for free. I let life self-organize to take care of me. And I somehow pulled this experiment off to the point where I was so deep in the mysticism, like sitting in meditation for 6 hours a day. I ended up manifesting a benefactor who was like, I believe in your work so much and the system change work that you're here to do. Like, here's a gift. And my bank account was like about to go empty. And I was like, staying in the experiment. So, and then all these people say, it sounds like this book, The Surrender Experiment. I never read it until like after I went through this experience, but it's very similar kind of orientation to like just trust life that deeply, and it wasn't easy, and I still navigate distrust moments. But anyway, I had been on this hiatus. I closed my healing practice, I closed my coaching practice, I closed my production, I closed everything, and went into this 2-year period of like just like listening so deeply that I couldn't move unless life was actually moving through me. I was done trying to control anything. And they were like, "You're a bard, and it's time to get back to work and work with leaders." I was just like, "Okay, what's a bard?" So I started to go down this rabbit hole into the mythology of the bard, which goes back to ancient Celts, ancient Druids. And bards, at first I was like, "Oh yeah, bard's like medieval, like song storyteller guy," And so they would bring the good news from kingdom to kingdom, and that felt really relative. I was like, "Cool, that's a cool archetype. I can get down with that," because people were living in these castles and they weren't allowed to leave. They didn't have TV, and so when a bard came, it was like news from the outside world, because you couldn't. If you left, you could get robbed in the forest. You know what I mean? Your crops are there, your family there, your community is there. You don't venture out beyond the castle walls. So when a bard comes, it's like, "Oh, what's going on out there?" Right? Which is very symbolic for like these echo chambers that we live in. These closed walls, these confined kingdoms of meaning making, and our little echo chamber of reality. So I was like, okay, I can get down with that. And then I went deeper, and I found out when the Romans were waging their war campaign on the Germanic tribes of Europe, and they got to Ireland, and they fought against the Celts, they came up against the fiercest tribe that they had ever come across. And they noticed that the frontliners would get this crazy strength out of nowhere, like they become the strongest 10 men. And they realized that the people on the back line that were singing these songs would give them the strength of the ancestors. And so the first thing they did was wage an assassination campaign on the bards. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Yeah. And so I also learned that it was one fraction of druidry. Like, to become a bard, you had to train for 20 years of initiations before you were allowed to give a transmission to the people, before you were allowed to do a poem to activate the tribe, before you were allowed to sing an ancestral song. 20 years of initiation. And I looked at my guy, I was like, it's pretty much been 20 years of initiation. So it was time to come back out into the world to bring my music, storytelling, poetry. And so that near-death experience was the kind of return of the bard. So that's why my subtext in my brain is return of the bard. On. And I feel that stream of my being as a druid. And I went to Ireland last year and cried my eyes out, visited all these stone circles, and just really felt that ancient collective wound that we all have from Rome, from the colonial empire, where it sparked, and where the sort of original animist cultures that we all share and we all have in common got infiltrated and targeted. And we're in the echo of that today. Everything that you're speaking to, that you're like, yo, this is not right, and like we all feel it, it's the loss of the animism, it's the loss of the relationship to place, to land, it's the colonial wound passed down through multiple generations. And we're seeing the most immediate echo of it being perpetrated on our brothers and sisters of the forest, the people that are our immediate ancestor representatives, because what they're experiencing over the last 500 years is what we experienced thousands of years ago in Europe. But now it's the modern, rapid, accelerated version of that. So,
right on.
Long story short, a lot in there, but NDE was the catalyst question.
You mentioned the potential of our consciousness and human abilities. More that we find out about our ancient ancestors, and you get past the false narratives of history, it seems like we had very powerful consciousness abilities, that it was connected to sound and vibration, and we had profound abilities to heal ourselves. And you mentioned these songs that they would sing. I think this is a key aspect to rediscover the powers of our consciousness and the connection to frequency and vibration.
What we are going to see over the next 2 years is going to literally explode people's minds in terms of the healing technology that's coming back from ancient Atlantis, from ancient Lemuria. The people that come in with these memories, like, I know one of my friends is an inventor, and it's like the kind of systems thinking that I'm like, you're like an ancient Atlantean wizard architect. Like, who are you? Like, who comes up with looking at freaking blueprints of technology that are just like, this is alien. This is not like, you're not a human being. You know what I mean? We're gonna see all that. And it's already like, it's been so suppressed, but now it wants, like, creation wants it to drop into the collective. That's gonna come, like, they try to stomp someone out here that has a free energy project, and then they pop up over here, and they're like, they can't, it's just gonna come out. And so that's healing tech, that's other tech, and we're gonna witness it over the next couple of years. I think just today I was reading on Instagram, it was all across my algorithm of around, they just found this, like, battery
Under the pyramid
complex.
Yes, yes, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, like it's so cool. It's so exciting and it's anything that challenges the conventional mind, that's part, like, again, my archetype in human design is a 5-1. I'm the heretic investigator. So, like, the kind of thought, the belief systems that I discovered through direct experience and through immersing and being around the fire with elders, like, it starts the larger narrative starts to get painted around our time-space continuum being messed with, and, like, the real histories. I led a group to the Bosnian pyramid last year, 36,000-year-old pyramid. It's older than Giza, but it gets dismissed by the conventional mind as natural. It's geological. There's, like, no way that these, like, perfect striated steps, that were inlaid are natural. Like, it's BS, but it's, like, in the middle, it's, like, in the middle of Bosnia. So no one's really tried to disprove it other than on the internet. But I went and I visited and I felt things. I saw things that I can't unsee, and then my buddy Nick Haslock, who you should have on, is also, like, alternative historian. He's a ceramics guy, and he studies, like, the different kind of ceramics through history. He was in Egypt and was, like, literally, like, people came over that were like, what are you doing, like, with suits on, when he was asking certain questions, like, seeing, like, there's no way that like, this was melted.
Yeah.
Like, this is bricks that melted down. Like, if you go down that sort of Tartarian, wormhole, like, all these different things, so. But what's cool is, like, when you go to these places, there's story in the stones, there's story in the land that sort of activates people's multidimensional memory. Like, things will come to you just by being there. You'll be shown things. They'll say, oh, this was a tomb. No, that was a vision quest initiation chamber. Yeah. Oh, this is a burial site. No, that was a ceremonial ground for initiation for high initiates. Oh, that was this. No, there's always a death narrative thrown. Oh, it was a tomb. It was, whatever. It's BS. So our civilizations function at a very, very high level of multidimensional. Like, we were part of the galactic, civilizational context. We had interrelational. I've seen pictures of ancient Tibetan tankas where there's yetis having tea with yogis.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like, the further we go back, history becomes mythology at one point. And indigeneity requires lore and mythology to sense make the true reality. And if we've been conditioned and siphoned into a particular controllable narrative where the mythology is lost and all the lore becomes this controlled law, we have to pop out and be like, oh wow, like, there's something deeply mystical about the nature of this reality.
100%.
And if we don't give ourselves that permission to go back through the history of our own ancestors, or the history of the world, and start to see where the discrepancies don't make sense. There's too much wild stuff out there that just makes absolute no sense from the conventional mind. But we can also get distracted by that and lost in that. What's more important is to do our inner work, and let that just be a cool thing that's, like, reinforcing why we need to reject a lot of the conditioning.
Yeah. I have to think that this pyramid discovery is going to be huge. It completely crushes the narrative that these guys were using water locks or pulleys and very primitive tools to build this stuff. This goes down miles underground, these huge structures that seem to have some sort of energetic use to them, and it probably goes beyond anything that we could possibly understand now. And I have to look at what Hollywood has presented over the years as fiction, And it makes you rethink everything, because the more discoveries that are coming out, it's like, oh, humanity's a lot older than we thought we were. They have more capabilities. They were highly technological advanced. Oh, they might have been more technologically advanced than we are now. And the more we discover, it just opens up possibilities. And it gets us to become more aware that we are capable of much more than we've been told.
Exactly. There's so many reasons why it's important to just explore and be your own journalist and have fun discerning between, okay, like, and this is one of the challenges with this kind of community, is that like some people are so open-minded that they're actually gullible. And that's where the psyops come in, and they're like, there's a grain of truth, and then the overlay comes in and hooks in, and again, now you're in this.
It's like thought form parasites.
Exactly, and also there's etheric implants that are in some of these conspiracy videos sometimes, where you go in and you're like, you get sucked in, and then boom, all of a sudden, off-planet etheric implants in your field now, and now you're vibrating lower, and you keep looping on fear, and then you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, and you just got an implant in your field through watching this thing. It's astral. Like Instagram is a big astral. The internet is a big astral reflection. So you have to go in, like, aware of what you're consuming.
Right on.
And to get more attuned to those subtleties. Like, yeah, I've had to, like, because I have enough energy sensitivity, and this is what I do with my clients. So I have awareness. I'm like, oh wow, that was like a dark timeline hook.
Whoa. I'd love to hear a little bit more about these astral implants, because I know that we can be reprogrammed and give access to this etheric parasite type of intelligence, but you're saying that these are intentional sort of astral implants?
Frequency warfare, if you will. There's a lot of different layers to it, and so again, to me, it's low-level sorcery. But if you're not doing your work, you can't catch it. Same thing, way like celebrities use charms. It's a form of a smell. Like, I'm Obama, and I'm very charismatic, and I'm using NLP on all of you. It's a form of sorcery. It's like, you're like, oh, he's so inspiring. Like, you don't see the charm because the conditioning doesn't allow you to discern or track what a charm looks like. Right? So there is magic and spells. I mean, like, this has a crystal inside of it.
Right.
What was Atlantis running its whole energy? Crystals. It's sorcery, but it's just repackaged differently than we look at. So, but on that level, to me, it's actually a good sign that they're like, physical violence is getting less and less and less. And it's more of these kind of subtle warfare things, which is a sign that we're going up in vibration as a planet. The most profitable thing in history has been violence. And now it's attention. That's a shift in paradigm from violence to attention.
I never thought of it that way.
So violence is no longer it's no longer the most profitable thing for these, call them sub-elites.
So how would you suggest disconnecting from that? Say we unknowingly connect to these astral programs and parasites. What would be the process for purging that?
Right. So there's different prayer work and affirmation work that's working with the sacred flame. So the violet fire is one of the most powerful things that we use in practice to clear karma, to clear external energies. It's one of the most powerful forces for transmutation. Saint Germain, that the Chohana, that seventh ray. So these are tools and technologies that come from mystery schools that have been stewarded by awakened beings for thousands of years that are available to us in this lifetime. So that's one of the tools that I work with for myself, and that I empower other people to work with. It's the violet fire, and there's sort of ways to invoke that and to build a relationship with these things that clear the etheric field, to clear, like, sage is great and copal is great, but like, to get deeper into like the insidious nature of some of these things, we have to work with a very high frequency, work with the angelic realm, work with the higher dimensional, benevolent higher dimensional beings, like the Hathors, or these ascended master beings are very helpful, because astral is not that, like, people take mushrooms and they think it's amazing, but you're actually opening up your field to the astral realm even more, and there's dimensions higher than the astral that we need to work with to clear astral energy. And there's like, our plasma has been getting messed with since the shift in ages. So things that build your plasma body, qigong, things that enhance your immune system, that what they call your wei qi field in Chinese medicine is your aura, things that create a very clean, radiant, strong aura. And a lot of that, like these copper devices, like there's homies out there in the work that make these things that will literally create a coherent structure for your water. We're water, so things that create coherence, water. So, getting things that grid your room, those kinds of things. These things are important to have good spiritual hygiene. And you'll see it's in Hollywood. I remember going to see Immortals, and there was a very advanced implant that came in. I was just like, whoa, that just came through the movie. Wow. And Doctor Strange 2. Doctor Strange 1 had no implants. It's Doctor Strange 2, a bunch of weird dark implants came in towards the end of the movie. Wow. So you just got to be mindful. And the more that you build your subtle body awareness, the more that you do your meditations, you start to get attuned to the subtler frequencies. And that's where a lot of the messery is actually happening. And the denser stuff is getting less and less. It's actually a very subtle warfare.
The point that we're at now at humanity, like I said earlier, we seem to be at a very important crossroads, but I am very encouraged by what I'm seeing coming out of the independent content creation community, people who are like yourself, like myself, who are starting their own entertainment fields, making their own films, podcasts, artwork, and presenting important information that will be beneficial for humanity. And there's this shift where more of us are starting to realize, oh, we can do this. It's not just locked in for Hollywood or the bigwigs or the gate-kept industry. We can start our own industry. And I'm very excited to see how we're doing with that. But it seems like there is going to be an inevitable collapse of the old system. To the degree of how detrimental it'll affect us, I think is going to be up to us.
100% in agreement and in alignment with you. I love what you're saying. And, sometimes it can feel daunting as an artist or content creator, having to playlist my music. Sometimes I'm just like, God, I got to pay to play it. I'm not getting, I don't know how some other artists do it, because I self-fund and because I have, I've had to learn how to be I had to learn how to be sustainable, and I feel for a lot of artists out there that don't have the same entrepreneurial skills that I've developed, and I look at people that have been further along from me, and I'm just like, geez, I feel like an uphill thing. And I am excited for more, I actually get the most satisfaction when I'm in a small room with a bunch of people and I'm reciting my poetry live acoustically versus having to be on a big stage with a backing beat or something. It's we do need these grassroots relational circles that are building more coherence and sense making. And I think in terms of the shift that we're talking about, Ra talked about it. It's called the Rise of the Sleeping Phoenix, which is 2027. And from the human designs lens, which coincides with a lot of other prophecies, I will add, that we're moving from authority being outside to being inside again. And just that alone is going to create a massive shift in consciousness. And he talks about it as a DNA transmutational process. The gene keys is a great thing to look into too, in terms of if we're operating in the shadow frequency, gift frequency, or Siddhic realm, which is again more higher dimensional potential, which is on a DNA level. We're actually in this collective DNA transmutational process, and a lot of these powers that are functioning in what we'd say the shadow level. A lot of the communities coming into their gifts, and a lot of other people are actually starting to unlock their cities, their superpowers. It's a Sanskrit word, siddhi, Siddhi. So it's unlocking the potential of your DNA. And a lot of the trauma is to prevent the DNA from coming online. So if you do your trauma work and you clear your ancestral stuff, you unlock some of your superpowers, your light body expands, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, I have this gift of being of oracular vision from my Irish line, or I have this gift of insight from my Cherokee line, or whatever lineage you get to work with that you've chosen as a soul, this body and that lineage, to unlock these potential gifts. So the transmutational process that's speeding up from outside, it is for us, but we have to have the right mindset and the right support and tools to make the most of that alchemical process. Otherwise, we get lost in it if we don't have context for what's happening. We get lost in our emotions. People check out. We all lost friends, sensitive friends to certain substances or to depression, to whatever. So we got to look after each other, take care of each other, take care of our people, and yeah, we get to be a beautiful part of a self-organizing wave, that because nature wants this to happen, life wants it to happen. And thank you for being a part of that with your podcast, and everyone listening, being a part of this evolutionary self-organizing intelligence.
100%, man, and thank you so much. That was a great note to close on. Before we do, let the audience know a little bit more about what you do and how they can find out more about you.
Yeah, so I have a free community for those that resonate, and I share transmissions twice a month. I also do one-on-one work with people, helping them, create more empowerment. Everything from retreats to sessions, and then I have my music, which is all kind of distilling this kind of awareness, but into a more digestible medium through hip hop, neo soul, and folk music and spoken word. And then, yeah, my Instagram, I do a lot of spiritual comedy and memes and inspirational content around the healing journey, what it means to be a human being right now. So my intention is to just continue to empower, inspire, and connect.
Excellent.
And all that's at Luke Cohen. It's Cohen with a K. That's the most important thing you remember. Luke, Luke, like Skywalker, Cohen, like Cohen Brothers, but with a K.
Awesome.
Luke
I will
Cohen.
have those.
And that's all my handles, all my websites.
Right on. Yeah, I'll have all that easily accessible in the description for everyone. Luke, thank you again. There's much more we could discuss. I'd love to have you back on in the future.
Sure.
And until next time, everyone.
Yeah, my pleasure, brother.
Yeah, man. Until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We will talk again tomorrow. See y'all then. Hello, friends. At some point in our journeys, we all need guidance and direction. One thing I've learned along the way is that there are many ways to connect with our soul mission. Jennifer Halcame offers over 30 years experience with intuitive tarot, life coaching, and energy and attachment clearing. She helps others with energetic blocks become aligned with their soul mission. She offers one-on-one or online Zoom sessions, and cases are assessed on an individual basis, and she works with everyone truly in need. You can email her now to set up a free consultation at jenniferhalcame@gmail.com or through Facebook Messenger. All those links are right in the description. Hello, friends. Have you tried what may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man? C60 PurplePower. My C60 story has led me to great health mentally and physically. It's helped me personally lose weight, have more energy, and fight aging in general. You can also get C60 for your pets. Our dogs love it. They may live forever. Go check out C60 for yourself. If you use the link right in the description, you're going to get 10% off your order plus free shipping. They have some incredible new products like gummies, oils, and much more.